We've got Shane and Robert in the Zoom.
Great.
So we're waiting on.
Your
Silva?
note taker, maybe?
Mike, yeah,
Yeah.
it should be Michael.
Okay. It's just at 2 o'clock now, so we're fine. Yeah. I was gonna join us over Zoom, but try to had time to take a break for.
What's gonna be happening?
Like that.
They had a pre-ACT, like practice ACT scheduled for that.
Mhm.
He's actually took the ACT last weekend for the first time, so he told me he didn't have to go, so he basically got a half day. He was like asleep when I left the house.
Oh, nice.
16. And then they just emailed, so they had a big technical glitch and all these headaches, they're gonna have to reschedule it.
So he's gonna miss another one.
So he's gonna get to miss another one. I'm sure he'll be thrilled.
We got Judy.
Yeah,
Yeah, let me text Robert real quick.
Oh, we have Robert.
Yeah, but they work right, their offices are right next
there
to
we
each
go.
other.
There he is.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Great.
I didn't know you were on task yet.
No, that's okay. Sorry.
Chad.
okay, and the recording is going, so we are good.
Do you guys have any for today?
We don't have anything prepped,
Okay.
right now. We've looked through some of this stuff, but we don't have anything printed or anything ready for
Okay,
you right now.
well, that's probably gonna be a pretty short day. We've got 24.
Huh?
We spent, it seems like it shouldn't be this hard to get through 24, but I spent with my team was very patient with me to go through it. We'd like to present it to you all and have you consider it. It looks different, but we want to go through a couple cases with you. I already emailed this to you, so hopefully it's already come through.
Yeah, I'm just opening it now.
And then, we can kind of explain, hopefully in a logical way, why we've made the adjustments we have. It shouldn't change the underlying meaning or effect of the article. Because we think that some of the stuff that we previously kind of agreed to was conflicting. So here, and in the context of, I think we had some good discussion last time around how we kind of handled dues deductions. So obviously, please put this up against the previous versions that we had, but here's what we'd like to do. So it had three, there was in the bottom part below, there was three different statements about if something is in here and becomes subsequently legal, it goes in. If something is enjoined, if a piece of legislation that makes it legally invalid is enjoined, it goes back into effect. And then it had this contemplation about something that's either wholly or partially upheld by the highest jurisdiction, with the final authority. So here's what we tried to do. The problem was that, in a general sense, we were wondering how it would be triggered to rebargain it. So like the first part that says up here in lines, starting in line 11, if a provision of this agreement fails for reason A, B, or C above, the party shall enter into immediate negotiations for the purposes of arriving at a mutually satisfactory replacement for such provision, regardless of whether the subsequently enacted legislation is the subject of a lawsuit challenging its enforceability. So here was what, when we step back from it, we're like, okay, but if we come together and we bargain a replacement, what would become the triggering activity that would bring us back to the table at one of these subsequent times, unless the decision then conflicted with what the subsequent agreement was? Is everybody following that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
So what we try to do is say, okay, look, let's bake that into the process by saying, furthermore, if a provision fails for reason B above, because everything that was under 24.2 is really just about this invalidation of enacted legislation, because it was called force of law or effective law. Such replacement language must include considerations of which provisions are to be enforceable if the subsequently enacted legislation is enjoined, repealed, struck down, or amended in such a way that permits the previously invalidated provisions enforcement. Which is, if you remember, that was really kind of what we did in the example. The good example, Austin, you brought up last time, was the dues deduction. It was like,
Right.
okay, so considering, if we have to consider that when we do this meeting, it'll prevent the problem of saying, okay, well, now it's been upheld, or now it's been enjoined, but we've already bargained a replacement. Because I think one of the concerns would be for the union is, and you heard me say this last time about, Hannah, you had brought up, I think in the provision, well, we want to replace it or go back to the previous language. And I'm like, well, we're not really comfortable having language that isn't in there, like reemerge, like come back if it's not in the agreement. So what our intention is to say, look, we have to consider those provisions when we do this. When we get together, we have to talk about that thing. We have to talk about that specifically. So that if there's going to be a swinging door or a contingency that talks about if this becomes legal, it's back enforced, so on and so forth. So that was kind of the intention. And then down in line 20, the wholly wouldn't matter because based on what we've now suggested in lines 14 through 18, if it's wholly upheld, then we've already done what we needed to do when we got together. The reason we would have to come back together is if there's some sort of a legal opinion that's rendered that kind of does something in the middle and it doesn't make sense. And then we want to be able to say, look, yeah, in that case, we got to get back together and give it another crack because it doesn't necessarily work or make sense. So that's our attempt to try to clean it up and make it clear. Again, in the context of the example being dues deduction, I think that again, trying to contemplate that specific eventuality in the time when we're forced to get together, we think kind of solves that problem.
okay,
I realize it's kind of an erudite sort of thing. So, I mean, we're happy to answer questions. If you guys want to take some time and think about it and put it up against the other one, they totally get it, understand, run some examples. If you have examples that you want to talk about now, we're happy to do that too. I think this kind of,
can I just try to reiterate what you
Sure.
explained?
Yeah, please do.
To make sure I understand.
yeah.
The idea is if something happens, we go to impact bargaining immediately, right? That's the word, like immediately is in there.
In B, yeah.
So
Well, for all of it,
During-
A, B, or C, yes.
during impact bargaining,
Mhm.
you basically want us together to think out all of the possible situations that could happen. And then include that in the language that are impact bargaining.
Yeah, and that's what we have in 15. That's what I've tried to capture. Such
Right.
replacement language must include considerations of which provisions are to be enforceable if the subsequently enacted legislation is enjoined, repealed, struck down, or amended in such a way that permits the previously invalidated provisions enforcement. So in other words, putting a contingency, let me try to do it a different way. So it would not force you to agree until a subsequent contract to remove the language entirely, which is really kind of what we heard you guys say last time. Because the official legal stance of, if like the new language comes out, right, there's a new piece of legislation and it says dues deduction is prohibited, you can't do it anymore. If we come together, kind of like what happened last time, and say, look, that's the new law, we can't have it, period, full stop, it's no longer allowable. And you're like, well, the contract allows it. And we don't talk about, well, what if it's later, not a dues deduction is enjoined, but what if the legislation which prevents it is enjoined?
Mhm.
And we've already agreed to remove it from the contract, then there's no way to kind of go back in time.
Mhm.
However, if we contemplate and say, look, kind of like what I can't remember who had suggested it last time, look, this is currently suppressed, it's currently illegal under the current law, it can't be enforceable now, but the language is still in there if such a time emerges in the future, so on and so forth. So that would have to be part of the impact bargaining. Now, when we get to the successor agreement, that's no longer impact bargaining, and we can deal with that later, but we wouldn't in the moment have to settle that bigger issue.
So what you're saying for like the dues deduction, if we could go back in time with what you're proposing,
Mhm.
is that we wouldn't get rid of it, we would put a clause saying like, because of this law, this article cannot be enforced at this moment, if this law were to be struck down or whatever, this dues deduction would again be able to.
Right, yeah, that's
And-
the intention.
And then once full book is done, then we would come to the table and see what we do about dues deduction, or we would keep
No,
like,
when we get to full book.
when we.
So,
right.
yeah, I'm talking about like, because the previous language didn't really give, at least in our interpretation, the previous language didn't really give us an opportunity to do anything other than come to a replacement which conformed to the law in its entirety. At least that was our interpretation. The intention here is to say, look, we have to come together and resolve this. But we're gonna go ahead and put right in the way we handle this, that one of the things that we need to talk about is kind of what you had said. Look, if and when this becomes enjoined, you don't want to necessarily give the language up its entirety, but we need, because of the law, you to acknowledge that right now the language can't be enforced. So it's, in other words, it
Yeah.
puts like a temporary position in place while the contract is still there. If we come to an agreement that we know what the law currently says, the law says you can't do this. Okay, we're gonna stop doing it. We've engaged in impact bargaining, which we're responsible for doing. But we would be able to come to an agreement that would allow for the fact that the language is still sort of on the books. But it would be we would agree that we're not currently following it because it's not legal. I don't know if I did a very good job explaining that. I'm
Can I
sorry.
just ask a follow-up
Sure.
question? Because I'm imagining it in the impact bargaining process, like I'm
Right.
thinking about it practically.
Sure.
When we come to the impact bargaining table,
Mhm.
we need to think through like different scenarios in which things are being partially or wholly enjoined or struck down. Or are we just basically creating a singular clause, right? That says like, if this were to happen, this would go into effect.
So the wholly or partially was related to the if it's upheld part, not if it's
Okay.
enjoined or struck down. So the wholly part, our goal would be the replacement language. If there's a contingency in the replacement language, that we would come to an agreement and we say, look, right now statute says we have to do this. The current contract says we're doing this, but we realize we have to change the way we're doing it right now because of the law.
Mhm.
If that law is subsequently upheld, we wouldn't necessarily have to change anything because we've already talked about the
Correct.
law in the agreement. If it's partially upheld, we're probably gonna have to come back to the table, because especially if the court either modifies the language or says this part is okay, but this part is not, we may not have foreseen all the eventualities, kind of like what
Okay.
you're saying, because we wouldn't be able to understand everything.
Okay,
I think and you can't necessarily think of everything in advance, but our goal would be, we would say, look, this is the law that's currently on the books. We understand that it's gonna be challenged, or it is being challenged, or whatever.
Mhm.
As it's written, this is what we're gonna do.
Mhm.
This language is kind of almost in abeyance, or it's suppressed. We can't follow right now. But we wouldn't necessarily force you to actually write it out of the contract as part of the impact bargaining session.
Mhm.
We would maybe let it sit there temporarily and then acknowledge that it's suppressed and can't be followed.
Mhm.
When we got to full book, that would be different.
Mhm.
Do you know what I'm saying? Because again, that's the difference between full book and impact, you know.
I think that makes sense. I think we'll have to go back and make sure we're understanding this properly and talk to
Okay.
everyone else, but I think that makes sense, how you've explained it here.
And we're happy to talk about it more, do more examples. Again, some of the last ones towards the end, the more boilerplate legalese ones are kind of difficult. Are there any other questions that we can answer for you all, either on 4 or 7?
No, I think 4 or 7,
Yeah.
we're good on. I think we just have to go through the edits and run through it one more time
Okay.
and make sure we're good. We've looked through it a little bit and we haven't, and I think, which one is it? 7, we're still on like one word,
Okay,
yeah,
So-
we're fine on 4.
yeah.
We've
Okay.
had that whole conversation about the and or, and
Yeah, yeah.
we're
Okay.
gonna change it back to and, but for,
Okay.
for 7, we're contemplating, you guys changing it to must. In
From
that-
us to May, right?
Well, we had brought, right, like,
May.
Yeah.
Mhm.
May, do whatever up to grieve, or like including grievance, and then you brought back must.
Oh, okay. I
And
know
so
what you're
we're talking about what the implications of having must in there would be, and we're not.
Not there yet, I get it.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
Um,
I guess let's do a review real quick, if that's
Sure.
all you have
yeah,
today.
yeah, that's all we got today. Can I get my score sheet up? real quick?
Yeah.
I've got 1, 2, and 3 as TA.
Yeah,
4 we just talked about, that's with y'all.
Yep.
5 and 6 we've TA'd.
Mhm.
7 is with y'all.
Mhm.
8 and 9 is RTA'd.
yeah,
10 is with us, and I do think we will have some language stuff based on your latest language, but we're gonna probably bring that next week, not this week.
right, I guess let's just pause there for a second here. So we're looking to get to the end of bargaining and get this done with.
Yeah,
Right, and we were even talking today about when's the soonest feasible that we could get this done, because we're really close to a lot of these articles.
Yeah,
right?
we're
We're
really
down to
close to a
quarter
lot of
two. And we're just not gonna get there without having those counters on 10, 13, and 16, those ones where we're still far apart on those
Yeah.
things.
no,
You know?
you're 100%
And
right.
I'm not, I'm not gonna, get angry and pretend like, anything else, but, having the delays, obviously you have to go through and figure out what's best for your team, but, we wanna get this done and we don't wanna be waiting weeks up between each counter here, right? We wanna have these discussions and say, let's get this done as soon as possible.
Sure,
When we get here each week, we're like, do they have 10? Are we going to
Mhm.
discuss anything else with this? Because discussing the legal stuff is important, but we can only do this for so long, without, looking at the elephant in the room and saying, we're super far apart on non-discrimination, we're super far apart on stipends, we're super far apart on RTs and, release time. So, we have to have those discussions to get to that final contract, and we would love to get to a final contract, early in summer at the latest and get that done to
No,
go for ratification. you know?
I appreciate that. I think what's difficult about, and I kind of brought this up before, the language changes in 10. We're in a strange spot. You almost want us to reassert language we don't like in terms of the language, because we could agree to the stuff that you struck from 10. But that changes fundamentally the stuff that you added. So we could reject the stuff that you added, but I don't want to necessarily reassert the stuff that we've tried to bargain out before. I mean, I guess that's what we could do. It's gonna look like I just think it's gonna look like a very aggressive proposal that's far more aggressive than what we had shown you before.
What are you talking about? Can you
So,
elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we talked about was like, you wanted to eliminate all fees.
Yeah,
In the full context of the fact that in previous sessions, we had actually suggested eliminating the fees. And we were willing in a previous session to pay a premium on getting them eliminated. And you all didn't want to do that, which is absolutely right, and that's.
what are you
perfectly
talking
fine.
about there? I don't recall a single proposal where you've done that.
Yeah, we wanted to eliminate the fee relief.
Eliminate fee relief.
Yes, in a previous session.
Okay, yeah, we don't want to eliminate fee relief.
No, I understand.
Yeah,
I
okay,
understand that, but we've had a significant amount of bargaining in the past where we had proposed eliminating it and paying a premium to do so, and you were not interested, which is perfectly fine.
yeah,
But certainly GAU is fully aware of the fact that our position is that it would be very unlikely that we would consider expanding it, which is what you suggested, was
yeah,
expanding it dramatically.
yeah, expanding it to cover all fees.
Knowing, maybe not knowing clearly, but probably having a pretty good indication that that would not be something that we would be interested in. But that's fine. You're welcome to propose it. Similarly, eliminating our ability to pay the raises, which is something that we have exercised not only during this full book, but it's something that I found out that we exercised it in the immediately previous full book right before I got here. It was something the university had done, which I didn't know until I asked. So if we go back and reassert the language that you struck, I mean, we can put that proposal together. All right, we'll do it. It's just gonna, I think it's gonna look. Okay. All right,
Yeah, I think we're at the point where we need to have these discussions and talk through them.
okay,
And once we get these other articles down, I think we could have a session where we trade a couple of counter proposals if we're at that point, but we need to get close enough to get to that point to be able to do that. Otherwise we have to wait a week between each proposal. you know?
so with respect to 13,
Mhm.
I think, I actually know that, I know for a fact we're gonna have that one for you next week. We were talking about it right before the session started, and I think we're relatively close on that one.
Okay,
I'm much more hopeful about 13 than I've been in the past. So, you know, I don't have it for you today, but I will have that one for you next week.
okay.
On the RT thing, we're still at loggerheads. I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about that one. I think that is one that we're still really far apart on, to your point.
Yeah, and I think, we stated this when we gave you our last proposal on Article 10 was that we made big movements on the minimum. And in our brains, we connected those two things. We're happy to lower that minimum, but
Right.
we want the protection of RTs, which is close to current contract language, is not exactly.
You said
what
that. You said
Yeah.
that. I'll acknowledge that.
Mhm.
And then I've got 19 listed as ready for TA, but not TA'd. And the reason I have that is, so you guys actually signed it and I went
Yeah.
to sign it and I found something. I'm happy to sign it as is because you guys signed it, but I did find something that I think is a mistake.
Okay,
So I wanted to
Okay.
talk to you all about it.
Okay,
So
okay,
one of the things that's required in the list of the report is we have to give you people's dues deduction status. We don't have
Mhm.
access to that information anymore.
okay.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is that if you're okay with it, and the reason I didn't cancel it is I wanted to at least talk to you about it first. I can withdraw the previous one and send you another one that has that phrase eliminated, but I didn't want to just do that over email and not at least have a conversation with you about it first.
Okay,
yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. Yeah, it's not something that
Because we don't-
you have
we
the
just-
information on, so it's not something you can do anyways.
It's not something that we wouldn't want to give you. It's something that we literally no longer, as of, July 1 of 2024, we don't even have it anymore. So,
Yeah, I think that's fine.
okay, then I'll revise that one and I'll resend it. Let's resend 19. That will finish up 19, and then we've got 23. Which
23 is on our side.
I think is on your side.
Mhm.
I had that we both made presentations on 4-4 on my notes. Did we both present the article on the same day?
No, I don't believe so. You gave us a proposal and we discussed through some of it.
Okay.
But I believe that was
Because
it.
I tried to have the date of the last proposal on both, but on both of our columns for that one, I have 4-4, so I don't know.
And I think we discussed some of it and I think we were pretty much okay. It was just adding in, we have to add in somewhere the connection to, the healthcare reopener that we've already negotiated.
Right,
So we want to make sure that's in one of the articles linked, or we link the healthcare article there.
okay. All right, and then 24 we just talked about, but I think it sounds like we're pretty close. 25. Which we presented, I think I have on March 28th. And I think the big question on that one is, I don't know if you guys have had any conversation about, a 3-year term from the time of ratification versus a 3-year term from the time of the expiration of the previous contract. I think that's the
Yeah.
key item on that one.
I have on my notes that we had given you something on March 28th and we had discussed that discussion, but I thought we had implied that you guys were going to
Yeah,
bring
I thought
some
you
were
example
the
language for
previous-
what you were
Oh,
intending.
I
Yeah.
apologize. I thought we actually brought something. Let me change my notes on this one.
Cause I think, if I recall, we are open to having that discussion on that.
Okay.
We have a couple of things that we probably want to see, such as, mandating reopening bargaining
Yeah, yeah.
a certain time in advance, but we're opening to the language you're bringing,
Okay.
discussing
All
that,
right,
yeah.
let me get on that one then. And then 28, I think we're pretty close on 28.
Yeah, I have notes that we're pretty much ready to TA on that one, so I think
Okay.
that's just one of the ones we will have to do a last second spot check, but then we should be ready to go.
Okay, so I think based on that, the ones that we probably need to just dig in and just focus on maybe after this chat is, we're still far apart on 10. We have to give you a counter on 13. I think some of it is probably gonna be amenable, some of it's probably gonna still be somewhat different. 16, as we just discussed, it looks like those are gonna be the ones that we're really kind of likely to remain somewhat stuck on, but maybe we can get some movement on those 3 when we talk next week. The
Yeah,
other ones I'd love to, like you had said, if we can clean the rest of them up, Cause I think we've made really good progress on them. If we can clean those ones up and get them done, that'd be great.
Mhm.
But I understand that it's one contract, it's not 26 individual contracts.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and we know those articles are the ones we're so far apart on, so we wanna, if it's gonna take multiple conversations, we wanna have the first conversation earlier rather than later.
okay. All right,
Anything else you guys,
No.
no?
all right, and we're good for next Friday?
Yes.
And you had said you've got a room,
Do you need the email, like, do you want me to email you the room dates?
well, it's the same time, but you said it was 23:05 and then 23:25. That's what I wrote down.
2340 and 2345.
Wow, I didn't even get it right at all.
Not even close.
2340
Yep,
and 2345.
got it. 4:18 and 4:26. Okay. Thanks a lot.
People in the Zoom, just hang out just a second with us.